I'd like to introduce a new, there are several actual graphic images of our new values along with our jet pig, all kinds of things to help us remember the new values. One of them is on the easel, a little smaller there, and printed here on the insert. This graphic here was kind of created along with the original statement. But this one right here, it was created by our own Beth Craven. Designed by our own Beth Craven. And you will be seeing posters being displayed. Thank you to Sally Jones for ordering this one in time for the service. In a famous 1841 sermon titled "The Transient and Permanent in Christianity," Unitarian minister, transcendentalist, and radical abolitionist Theodore Parker distinguished between the abiding universal truths of religion and the changing forms in which these truths are expressed over time. Like so many reformers before and after him, Parker was reminding his folks not to get caught up with the changing forms of faith, doctrines and creeds, specific rituals, but rather to focus on the eternal truths that lie at their core, the indwelling of spirit, the voice of moral conscience, the ethics of love and justice. As a liberal religious tradition, Unitarian Universalism continues to embrace that reformist spirit, holding fast to core values and commitments while remaining open to new perspectives, new experiences, and new forms. We did not choose an easy faith, my friends, but we did choose a meaningful one, a transforming and transformative one. One that promises to both comfort and challenge us as we seek the truth in love, reminding us always that we are connected to each other and to all that is, and therefore we are never alone. In June of 2024, before the final discussion of the proposed changes to Article 2, Reverend Victoria Safford said to the several thousand delegates at General Assembly, "However we vote, we put love at the center, unflinching, insistent. This free faith we so cherish reveres the past and trusts the dawning future more. We believe in evolution, unfolding always, not unraveling, and revelation is not sealed." Today, only 1.5 years later, with fascism and imperialism and AI on the rise, I'm not sure how many of us really trust the dawning future. That feels a little too rosy, Pollyanna optimistic for how I often feel these days. But I do think that we UUs are a people who believe in evolution or transformation. 80% of the delegates to the 2024 GA, representing over 700 Unitarian Universalist congregations, voted to adopt the new expression of our core commitments. We may not always like change. Some UUs left the fold completely as a result of that vote, but most of the time, we embrace change as a necessary part of sustaining our living tradition. The UUA principles are by far the most widely known and influential expression of what UUs have in common, the closest thing that we have to a statement of belief. But even the principles have changed over time. The original statement was created in 1960 as the Unitarians and Universalists were consolidating. At that time, the wording was hotly contested, as is a hallmark of our movement. After extensive and heated debate, a compromise was finally reached, and 6 principles were adopted to express what UU congregations, quote, unite in seeking. The original version of the principles was revised in 1985 after a comprehensive grassroots process led by UU women. The general concepts of the original principles were retained, but the wording was changed to reflect the new values of gender inclusivity and respect for the web of life. A list of 5 sources was added to Article 2 at that time in 1985 to acknowledge our growing pluralism. And 10 years later, in 1995, an additional source was added to include Earth-centered traditions. Over the last decade, many UU congregations, including this one, adopted an 8th principle, although it was never incorporated into the one that lives in the UUA bylaws. But many congregations, over 200 of them, adopted an 8th principle for themselves to express our commitment to dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So the principles, seemingly so foundational to Unitarian Universalism, were never static or fixed, nor were they ever meant to be. In fact, the UUA bylaws state that Article 2 must be reviewed every 15 years to ensure that our expression of our purposes and covenant still adequately expresses the shared core of our faith. When it was time for the General Assembly to review Article 2 in 2020, it became clear that many people in our faith movement felt it did need significant revision. Some yearned for more poetic language, with enough spiritual depth to hold us in times of great need or distress. Others felt that instead of adding an 8th principle to articulate our commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression, we should instead rewrite the whole thing, not just as an add-on, but the whole thing to reflect our commitment to widening our circles. Many felt that the principles placed a disproportionate emphasis on the individual, contributing to harmful cultures of individualism inside and outside of our movement. Others felt that the language of affirming and promoting principles didn't adequately support actively living them out together. And for decades, UUs had been asking why love, so fundamental to our Universalist heritage, was missing from the principles, not mentioned at all. For all of these reasons and more, after an extensive 3-year democratic process involving thousands of UUs, and probably some of you, I hope so, we opted for change. Of course, just because the UUA has officially replaced the principles with shared values doesn't mean that individual UUs, or even all UU congregations, have to get rid of the principles. So those of you who are feeling some tension and anxiety can breathe a sense of relief. Don't have to get rid of the principles. The principles will always be part of our UU heritage, and UU congregations are free to use any language they choose in their own mission statements, covenants, and worship services. It even says that in the new covenant in that final section on freedom of belief. There is no dogma in our tradition, no creed that we all must adhere to in order to belong. We rely on covenants rather than creeds to define, orient, and unite us as Unitarian Universalists. However, as a member congregation of the UUA, UUCSR is beholden to the UUA covenant as currently expressed, as well as our own congregational covenants. And I know this congregation hasn't been very connected to the UUA in the past decade or maybe longer, but my friends, I want to encourage you to lean in to these wider connections. Because now is no time to go it alone, as individuals or as congregations. Now, more than ever, we need to foster connections, networks that can resist the lies of supremacy and separation that we are being sold, and the policies that seek to enforce them. We need to make visible the connections that already exist among us, including denominational connections, and make new ones too. Uniting around shared values is essential for making critical connections right now. For me personally, as someone who is involved in interfaith solidarity networks, the language of our shared values is far more useful and relatable than the language of our principles. So it's not just the language that matters. We UUs often get very caught up in language. We argue about wording and punctuation. We want to get it just right, as if there's only one way, and as if we could ever agree on it. And as if the words themselves are the point. The words aren't the point. Rather, the words are meant to point to something that is deeper and more meaningful and transformative. In the case of our covenants, the words are meant to hold us together by directing us towards certain ways of being, certain forms of doing. This is why we often say Unitarian Universalism is about deeds, not creeds. In practice, though, we UUs sometimes act as if the opposite is true, putting more emphasis on statements than on actions. Something egregious happens in the world that contradicts our values, and what do? We make a statement. And I'm not trying to create a binary here. Speech is a form of action, and a very important one. Statements are important. It's just that when we think that making a well-worded declaration is sufficient, or when we miss the opportunity to make an impact because we can't agree on wording, that's when I think we fall short of our faith. Now, this is a little strange to be saying in a service focused on a statement, actually 8 services focused on a statement, but bear with me. Right now, we need to move beyond statements and into concerted action with others who share our values. We need to move beyond affirming and promoting our principles into actively embodying them together in solidarity with others. And I think this is precisely the direction the new values statements point us. As I was writing those very words last night, after a day here of my first time participating in the Saturday breakfast for our neighbors, and then doing a Know Your Rights training here in the sanctuary, and then joining many of you at the protest in Old Courthouse Square, I was writing these very words about moving beyond statements into action, and a friend of mine sent me a video. It was a video of an Episcopal bishop from New Hampshire named Bishop Rob Hirschfeld. And he was speaking at an evening rally somewhere. It didn't say where he was. This is what the bishop said to the gathered crowd. I have asked the clergy in the Episcopal Diocese of New Hampshire to get their affairs in order, to have their wills written, because it may be that now is no longer the time for statements, but for us, with our bodies, to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable. Now is the time for us, he said, with our bodies, to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable. We are living in times of growing risk, my friends. So many things that we value, we are dependent upon for our collective well-being, are at risk right now. So when we are assessing the kinds of risks we are each willing to take in the days and months ahead of us, that is, if we have enough privilege to choose how much risk that we take on, we also need to factor in the risks involved in doing nothing, in staying quiet. It's getting clearer to a growing number of us that the risks involved in doing nothing are far greater than the risks involved in putting our bodies on the line. Let's take a deep breath together. I know this is really anxiety-producing stuff, but we are living in anxiety-producing times. And as much as we gather here in community to offer each other comfort and solace, we also gather here to practice our covenants, to live out our mission, to embody our values in a spirit of courageous love. So let's keep breathing together when we name some of the hard truths that we are living in. You'll notice in the new values statement that the description of each of the values uses active verbs. And this is one notable difference from the principles, which were a little bit more like statements of belief, actually. In the new articulation, we covenant to take specific forms of action together to live out our shared values. Protect the earth and all beings from exploitation, repair harm, embrace our differences, dismantle racism and systemic oppression, collectively transform, grow spiritually and ethically, share our faith, presence, and resources, build and sustain accessible and inclusive communities. These are not just statements of principle, they are promises to act. And importantly, the actions are broad enough to leave plenty of room for all different kinds of approaches. There's no one right way to do any of them. We don't all have to risk arrest. We don't all have to use our bodies or our voices in the same ways. In fact, that wouldn't even be helpful. We need all kinds of people doing all kinds of things. Just like at UUCSR, each of us contributes our time, talent, treasure, and trust to our collective endeavor of celebrating life, empowering people, caring for one another, and helping to build a better world. There's no single right way to contribute to our mission here at UUCSR. So many different kinds of offerings are necessary. What matters is that everyone participates in the ways that they can, when they can. There are seasons to our lives. We don't all have to sustain the same type and the same level of participation. It's really no different from the collective endeavor of resisting the administration's assaults at home and abroad. As some of you are exploring in Reverend Amy's biweekly Wednesday night drop-in class, there is no one right way to resist fascism. If we're aligned around shared values and a common purpose, it all matters. Attending protests, calling our representatives, writing postcards, accompanying those at risk, knowing and defending our rights, witnessing and observing, mutual aid, financial support, civil disobedience, music, and art that inspires moral courage, and so much more. Every contribution, everyone's voice, everyone's presence matters. That's core to our universalist theology. Everyone matters. Everyone belongs. Every contribution. Reverend Ashley Horan, an organizer with a leadership role in the Unitarian Universalist Association, lives just one block from where Renee Good was killed in Minneapolis. She has been live streaming and reporting out from what is happening in the community, in the neighborhood, in the aftermath. In an interview with the UU World on Friday, Reverend Ashley said, "Amid a terrible and terrifying time in Minneapolis, she has seen the very best of people, the very best of faith, the very best of humanity, just showing up for each other." She says, "What I want to say to our folks, to Unitarian Universalists, is that if you feel helpless, don't. There is a role for you, and the time is now to get involved." So as we continue to explore the new articulation of our UU covenant during this pivotal point in history, I hope you will find that your faith is renewed in some way. Your Unitarian Universalist faith, your faith that together we can make a difference in a hurting world, your faith that your presence and participation matter. They matter in here and they matter out there. At our worship service next week, in time for Martin Luther King Day, Reverend Amy will be preaching on the UU value of justice, that first letter in our JETPIG acronym. We will be doing about 2 services a month, that I said, in this series, where we will be looking at each of the values in turn. And it won't be consecutive Sundays, about 2 a month. We will explore the rich theological heritage of each value in our tradition, where they come from, as well as how they call us to live out our faith today in that enduring spirit of transforming love that guides us always. Thank you. May it be so.